All right, here we are in lesson 5. We're going to start talking about how to figure out what the law requires of you as a business. As we start this, I want to remind you I am not qualified to give you any legal, tax, or business advice. Confirm any ideas you get from here with your own professionals. I'm going to talk about my process and some general principles for how to find this information, but ultimately, you are responsible for making sure that your business follows any legal requirements. And so it's worth spending some time trying to figure out what those are and making sure you're doing it right. There are a lot of places online to get bad advice. People will tell you, like, oh, I never did that. I never um, kept track of my money that way, or I never signed up for a business license. Just because they didn't and have not had any problems doesn't mean it's best practice. So you're going to want to check with your own state and local sources. You're going to want to check with your own legal and tax professionals to make sure that you're doing things that are going to work for you forever and that you're not going to have any concerns about making a mistake and getting caught or pushing the boundaries of what's legally accepted. One thing to understand a little bit about as a small business owner, as a self-employed tutor, is some of the principles of law behind your small business. Know that your state or your city may require you to register your business. My state requires or allows towns to set their own guidelines. My city um, requires a business license if you operate a business and it's not under your own name. And that costs $50 every 2 or 3 years, I think. I had an application, it had to be notarized, and I sent it to the city and they sent me my license. You can find out more about this by looking for the name of your state and the words business license, or just look at small business regulations. So generally, cities and states want people to start businesses, right? So they're not going to put up too many barriers to you going into business because it is good for the city and it's good for the state if people are working and making money. But it can be a little vague sometimes, especially in a business like tutoring that is not enormous. Like there's a lot you can find about what it takes to start a restaurant or what it takes to start a medical practice, because those are large and mainstream and subject to a lot of regulations. And with a small business like tutoring, where there aren't necessarily as many specific rules and guidelines, it can be a little harder to figure out what to do. Some places have statewide rules and others leave it all up to the towns. I told you the process I did with a form and a fee. And some things that might make a difference in the laws that apply to you are the size of your business, your location, obviously, what town you're in, whether you tutor under your own name or whether you have a separate business name, what's sometimes called a DBA or a doing business as name. And it may also matter if you have a physical place of business. If you have a office or a space in your home that students actually visit you at, the regulations may be different from if your business is 100% virtual. So you need to understand those details as they relate to local law. As you start your business, you also need to know a little bit about the different types of businesses there are and what's the best fit for you. And this can seem overwhelming at first. There's a lot of information out there. A really good source for finding out the details is SBA, the Small Business Administration.gov. You can find some articles and explanations there, and you can also find some local resources, many of them free, that may be able to help you answer some of your questions. Here are the basics, and this is based on information on SBA.gov. Here are some basics about the different forms a business can take, and all of this information comes from SBA.gov. So the most basic form of a business is a sole proprietor. This is a simple structure where a person offers goods or services for pay, and the money comes to them directly rather than to a business. This is the most simple structure for a business, and in fact, it's the default. So if a teenager starts to babysit, they are functioning as a sole proprietor. The parents write a check to them personally. They put it in their personal bank account. By default, they're a sole proprietor. Another structure your business might take is an LLC, or a limited liability company. This is an option that you may want to consider because it has some tax benefits, as well as offering some personal liability protection, meaning it puts a little distance between you as a person and your business. So your personal life and the decisions your business makes. More moving up the complexity ladder, the next structure would be a corporation. And there are several different types. A C Corp offers you more protection than an LLC would, but it also offers more rules and more structure that you have to comply with. An S Corp is another type of corporation that you may want to consider because it does have certain tax benefits. But again, you would want to discuss all this with an accountant and make the decision about what structure is the most beneficial for you. There are others. There are partnerships, there are trusts, there are nonprofit corporations. There are lots of different types of businesses you can run. These are the most common that tutors discuss, and the ones that are most geared towards smaller businesses. Another question that comes up a lot with tutors starting their business is, should you carry insurance? Again, that's a really individualized decision. What insurance you need, how much. There are a couple different kinds. One is liability insurance. Just like insurance on your car, liability insurance covers the cost of repair, medical care, solving problems if in the course of your work someone is hurt. So as a purely in-person tutor, you may not have students coming to your office or coming to your home. You may not need the physical protection a policy like this may offer. If you work at all through a school district, they will have requirements for what type of insurance you must carry. There's also a type of insurance called errors and omissions, or professional insurance. And this type of insurance covers you in the event that someone makes a claim that you have not done the work you set out to do or promised to do, that you have been negligent or careless or misrepresented something in your tutoring. Nobody goes into tutoring with a plan to cause harm or a plan to make people unhappy, but ultimately there are people in the world that either misunderstand what you have set out to do or are acting in a malicious way. You may want to consider having insurance that protects you in a situation like that. Think about, as you're looking for an insurance policy, where you'll do business, whether you'll be traveling, whether you will have students in your office or in your home for tutoring. Those are also factors that will affect what type of insurance you need. I mentioned a school district may require it, and you need to think about what the risks are to you, what assets you would be risking, what potential harm there could be to you if there was a negative outcome, and think about what you want to do to protect that. Compare quotes from a few different companies. Ultimately, if you call any insurance company and ask them what kind of coverage you need, they're going to recommend a policy. Nobody's going to say, like, no, don't worry about it. So remember that any company you request a quote from, their ultimate goal is to sell you an insurance policy. So get a couple quotes, compare them, and see what makes the most sense for you in your business. You may want to talk to your current insurer. Many of the companies that may be doing your car insurance or your home insurance also offer these types of business policies. One company I know of that lots of tutors have their policy through is Hiscox Insurance, and they offer a professional insurance and errors and omissions policy specifically geared towards tutoring or to education professions. So they know the business. That is one place you may look, but there are certainly other companies that offer this type of insurance. Another big another big expense and sort of a frightening one for tutors or self-employed people in general is taxes. Um, self-employment taxes in particular, because when you're not working for a paycheck, not getting a W-2 at the end of the year, there are no taxes being taken out of the fees that you collect as a tutor. And so you are responsible for paying all the taxes to the government at the right time. So one way to do this is if you are a part-time tutor, or if you are not the only breadwinner in your household, you can make sure that enough tax is deducted from whatever W-2 paychecks are coming in to cover the tax burden. So at various times, we have used the W-4 when you sign up for your job to just either have an extra fixed dollar amount taken out, or to have we've increased our exemption or decreased our exemptions, which increases our tax withholding. And you would want to consult with HR at your job and or your accountant and find out what the best amount is for you and what the appropriate amount is. If you are not able to have taxes deducted from a paycheck, that's sort of the simplest way, then you need to pay those quarterly taxes yourself. Estimating how much tax you're going to owe is tricky. And that's why accountants have a business. So that's something that you may want to do some research on, look at your historical tax rate, and then decide whether that is the right rate to continue at, or whether you want to increase or maybe decrease your tax withholding. It's always better to have a little extra tax money set aside in your savings account than to get to the end of the year and realize you have to write a check for money you haven't saved. So, especially at first, I recommend being pretty conservative and setting aside a good chunk of money to pay your taxes. Because paying too little over the course of the year results in penalties. So if you owe over a certain amount of tax or a certain percentage of tax, you also have to pay a penalty to the government on top of that. So it pays to be cautious and make sure you have set enough aside to pay taxes at the end of the year. And consult an accountant sooner rather than later. It can seem like a small amount of money when you're just starting out your tutoring business, and a consultant with an accountant, consultation with an accountant would be a significant amount of that, but it can save you a huge headache down the road if you discover you have not set aside enough taxes. To know what you need to set aside for taxes, you also need to know how much you're making and how much you're spending. And there are lots of different ways to keep track of that. And you need to find the one that is the best fit for you and that you're going to use throughout the year, and that will give you the information you need when tax time comes. At first, a spreadsheet might be fine. I also recommend keeping a separate bank account for your tutoring income. It just makes it a lot easier to keep track when you know that all of the activity in that one bank account is related to your business. It's much simpler than trying to sort out which transactions were for what, especially if you're using a program like QuickBooks and importing your bank activity. If you have personal activity and business activity all going into one account, you're going to need to spend some significant time in QuickBooks sorting it all out later. It's easier to just keep a separate bank account from the beginning. If a spreadsheet is not enough to meet your needs, QuickBooks or Wave is a more complete accounting system. These systems give you ways to code all of your income and all of your expenses, to keep track of costs like fees for payment processors, to predict your income going forward, and to determine how much you made during the year. All of this is really beneficial. They both also offer invoicing. You can charge your clients directly using their systems. So you will need to invest some time in learning an accounting system, but at the end of the year, your accountant will be quite happy, and you will also be able to get a lot of information that you can't get just from keeping your notes on a spreadsheet. There are two categories of information you'll want to keep track of. One is your income. So likely you want to keep track of which students you've seen, how much each one has paid you, and in total how much you've made. And you want to keep track of your expenses. So this is that old shoebox of receipts. QuickBooks for certain, probably Wave offers ways to digitize that to email receipts directly into the program. You can also, I keep a tag in my email inbox. Anything that I've spent for my business, I flag the receipt. And then I have a second source of information when I go to total up my expenses for the year. You would want to keep track of mileage if you're seeing clients in person. You may be able to deduct something for having an office at home, for equipment that you invest in strictly for your business. All of these are possible deductions that could save you some money at tax time. And I've done my own business tax returns up until this point, and every year I say, like, nope, next year's the year I get an accountant. I am certain that I'm not taking full advantage of all the things that are available to small business owners um, by doing the taxes myself. I think that it is very beneficial if you do go through that whole process yourself at least once um, on your own or with an accountant. But ultimately, I think that accountants they are experts and they can take a look with an expert eye and notice what you're leaving out, notice what you may have not thought of. So keeping good track of your money makes it so much easier to hire someone to do that higher level decision making for you. So it's definitely worth it. And if Albert Einstein struggled with it, why can't we? The hardest thing to understand in the world is the income tax, he said. And in the US, I think that's true. There are so many variables and so many things to consider. And we can't be experts in everything. So this is one of those times where it really pays to get some help. So I hope that in this lesson, I have prepared you for some of the things you need to take care of without scaring you off. Remember that here in the US, especially, the government wants people to start businesses. There are a lot of benefits to working for yourself and starting a business, but there are also some things you need to know, and you need to educate yourself about the legal and safe and smart way to do those things. So find some good sources of help. At the end of this module, you'll have a checklist for some of those things to look into. And these basic structures are going to protect you, and they're going to let you go forward in your business with confidence.